Hello, welcome to Excel class. My name is Glenn Harris, and I'm a certified technical trainer and Office Master instructor. My goal is to teach you to excel at Excel. In the first tutorial in the series, we'll look at navigation techniques. Although Excel's primary purpose is to create formulas and perform data analysis, learning key features requires the proper foundation. Creating formulas and performing data analysis requires that we understand navigation technique. In the following tutorial, we'll examine two ways that we navigate as we're using Excel. One technique would be to navigate with our keyboard, but the other technique would be to navigate with our mouse. As we're creating formulas, we'll use a combination of both techniques. But before we begin, I would ask you to download a file from excelclass-downloads/lesson1-navigate.xlsx, and I'd like you to be aware that the file name and the path are case sensitive. When you download that workbook, I'd ask you to start Excel, open the file, and you might get a warning because you've downloaded a file from the internet. You might need to click Enable Content. I'd like to begin with a discussion of how we navigate using our keyboard. What I would like to point out is on a standard US keyboard, we have an Enter key on the right, but there's also an Enter key on your numeric keypad if you have a full-size keyboard. What I'd like you to do is press and hold the Enter key down, and you'll notice that green rectangle referred to the active cell is moving down very quickly. If you'd like to move up, hold Shift and Enter. Where Enter moves us down, I hold Shift, I hold Enter, that goes in the other direction. And as much as I'll need you to move up and down, I would also need you to move right and left. Notice on the left side of the keyboard, we have a key called Tab. What I would ask you to do now is hold the Tab key, and I'd like you to tab a little past column Z. As we pass column Z, notice the column letters start repeating. Where Tab moves us to the right, Shift Tab moves us to the left. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and the Tab key. Just like Shift Enter moves us up, Shift Tab moves us left. Then at that point, people usually say, can't I just use the arrow keys? And the answer is yes. Well, when we're creating formulas, we're going to use what's called keyboard modifiers. On a standard US keyboard, typically the arrow keys are in the lower right section. But instead of just holding the down arrow, on the bottom row of your keyboards, you'll notice that there's a key called CTRL, Control, on either side of the space key. What I would ask you to do for me is hold the Control key, and with your other hand, I'd like you to tap down arrow. When I say tap, I mean touch release, touch release. Control down arrow is called jumping. You'll notice I jump to the last row of data, followed by the last row on the spreadsheet. Then I'd ask you to hold the Control key and press up arrow. Notice Control up arrow brings me to the bottom row. Control arrow brings me back to the top row. When people ask you if you know Excel, I'm not sure they need you to know that there's 1,048,576 rows. So I think it would be helpful if you knew there was in excess of 1 million rows. Now, after you do a Control up arrow, I would also like you to try Control right arrow. Hold your Control key, tap the right arrow. First, I jump to column H, and then I jump to column XFD. I'm not sure anybody needs you to know that XFD represents column 16,384, but I think it would be helpful if you knew there were roughly 16,000 columns. Hopefully you don't want to press the arrow key 16,000 times. I would like you to hold Control, press left arrow, brings us back to column H, and then if I hold Control and tap the left arrow again, I'm back here in column A. So Control and arrow key is called jump. When we're creating formulas, I'll need you to use Control arrow key. Another modifier key I'm going to need you to work with is the Shift key. And Shift is one row above the bottom row. Instead of just tapping the down arrow, what I would ask you to do now Hold the Shift key, press the down arrow, press the right arrow, and notice that Shift down, Shift right selects or highlights. Everything we do on our computer is based on this concept called select and then do. If I need to format this, delete it, copy it, calculate it, first I need to select it. So Shift arrow selects, Control arrow jumps. I'd like you to let go of the Shift key and tap the left arrow key once. That would bring you back to cell A1. Holding the Shift key can be tiresome, and you should know that there's a shortcut to enable something called Extend Selection Mode. On the top row of your keyboard, there's a set of keys called function keys. What I would ask you to do is find the key called F8 on the top. When you press the F8 key, you haven't seen anything change. But if you look at the bottom of your screens in the lower left, notice this word Extend Selection. What that means is because I pressed F8, I no longer have to hold the Shift key. Just tap the down arrow, tap the right arrow. And because I've used F8 Extend Selection, Shift is now optional. To turn that off, press F8 again, we disable Extend Selection. But I'd ask you to tap the left arrow key again, navigate back to cell A1. When we're creating a formula, I'm going to ask you to combine Control and Shift. You could either do that with 2 fingers or with 1 finger across both keys. While holding Control Shift, I'd like you to use your other hand, and I'd like you to tap the down arrow and then tap the right arrow. And you'll notice that Control Shift down, Control Shift right both jumps and selects. When we're creating formulas, that becomes an important skill set. Then as much as I'd like you to navigate with your keyboard, there are also times we'll select or navigate with our mouse. What I would ask you to do is point your mouse at any cell here on the sheet. You'll notice that when I point my mouse at the center of a cell, the cursor appears as a fat white plus. I would ask you to single left click any of those cells in the center, spin the mouse wheel up or down, single left click in the center, up or down. Now you're not going to travel 1,000 rows this way, but if you're trying to move a short distance, spinning the mouse wheel is certainly another option. An important concept, however, is that we'll only see that fat white plus sign when you point your mouse at the center of a cell. I'd like you to realize we do not select the cell by pointing to the thick edge at the top or the bottom. I'd like you to point your mouse at either the top or the bottom of the active cell, the one with a thick green border. You'll notice that the fat white plus changes to a 4-headed arrow. That's called a move or navigation cursor. Then I'd like you to point your mouse at the lower right corner above the green square, and you'll notice that the fat white plus changes to a thin black plus. That's called an autofill cursor. We do not select the cell by pointing to the edge of the cell. We do not select the cell by pointing to the corner. Always select the cell from the center. If you'd like to select more than one cell, when you click on the center of the cell, hold your left mouse button and drag down or right or left, and then you could let go. The techniques we've seen so far are useful for what I would call short distance navigation, but there are times when you're required to navigate larger distances. Imagine I have to go to cell A55,000 for whatever reason. I'd like you to learn a couple of techniques to access the GoTo command. One of the techniques you should know to access GoTo is at the top of your screen, notice that we're on the Home tab. To the far right of the Home tab, click on the word Find and Select. And then below the word Find and Select, I'd ask you to click GoTo as the third word. Notice that when you click GoTo, we get a window that asks you for a cell reference. When people ask you if you know Excel, they'll expect you to know. A cell reference requires that I first type a letter, followed by a number. No spaces, no commas. I'm going to type A in a bunch of numbers like 555. Make sure it's less than 7 numbers. Click OK or press Enter. And as long as you type a letter and a number, when you press Enter or you click OK, you could travel really far, really fast. When people ask you if you know computers, they expect you to know that there are keyboard shortcuts to access the GoTo command. One of those shortcuts is hold the Control key and press the letter G. After you press Control and the letter G, let's type in A1 and press Enter. And a shortcut to Control G is you could also press the F5 key on the top row. F5 accesses the go-to. Here I'm going to type A5 or something. I'll press Enter. And you can also access the go-to command by using what we call the name box. You'll notice to the left of the formula bar we have a box that tells us the name of the active cell. If I click on the name box and I were to type a cell reference like A555, when I press Enter, that would be a shortcut to the go-to command. And as much as I'd like you to know how to navigate from cell to cell, we also need to know how to navigate from sheet to sheet. At the bottom of your screen where you see the word Navigate 2015, 2016, this area I'm pointing to with my mouse, these are called worksheet tabs, and right now we're on a tab called Navigate. Using your mouse, I would ask you to click on the 2015, the 2016, the 2017. Each sheet has different data. Typically a workbook, an Excel file, has so many sheet tabs at the bottom we can't see all the sheet tabs. A great trick to learn is down here to the lower left of the word Navigate, you'll see two arrowheads. The technical word for those arrowheads is Sheet Tab Navigation Button, but I don't know that anybody needs you to know the words Sheet Tab Navigation Button. What I'd like you to do is never left-click on those triangles, but I would ask you to right-click on the triangles. After you right-click your mouse, notice you get an Activate window, and if I double-click on a sheet, I go there. So if you right-click the triangles, activate, double-click, navigate to any sheet. As much as we can navigate from sheet to sheet using our mouse, we could also use our keyboard. If you find yourselves using Excel many hours per day like I do, I don't think anybody's going to test you, but you should still know this shortcut. If I were to hold the Control key, to the right of your backspace key is a key called Page Up or Page Down. And I'd like you to hold Control and press Page Down, PGDM. You'll notice the Control Page Down moves you a sheet tab to the right, and then if you hold Control and use PG Up, Page Up, that moves us a sheet tab to the left. So to practice what it is you've learned, I'd like you to go to the sheet tab called Lab Links, and on the Lab Links, let's download Navigate Lab A. When you click on that link to download, you may have to open and enable macros. And after you enable the file's contents, you should see a question window. I would ask you not to click the X in the corner, but what I would ask you to do is click on the word question 1 and drag that somewhere else to the side. I'd like you to realize that every question requires that we first click a cell to deactivate that window. I'd ask you to click any cell on that spreadsheet. Once you've clicked the cell, you can read the question, which is asking you to navigate to the last row of data. It's not wrong to experiment, but I don't want you to tap the down arrow key 1,000 times. I want you to jump to the last row of data. When I say last row of data, I don't mean row 1 million. I mean row 500. And when you land in row 500, now use your mouse. I would like you to click on the Submit button. And if you've done that correctly, Submit will bring you to the next question. So question 2 asks you to navigate from sheet 1 to sheet 2. You could use your mouse, you could use your keyboard. But remember, if you're going to use your keyboard, you'd have to first click a cell to deactivate the question window. And I need you to navigate to the second sheet tab. Once you get there, use your mouse to click the Submit button. Now the third question asks you to select or highlight cells A1 to A500. What I would ask you to do here is click on A1 first, and recall that you don't want to press Shift arrow 500 times. In this question, I'm asking you to combine Control and Shift. I want you to both jump and select all the way to A500, and now click on the Submit button. The last question asks you to use Go to navigate to cell A12345. And recall that to answer any question, I first need you to click a cell on the sheet. After you access the Go To command, I'd like you to then type A12345. When you press Enter, you should land in that cell. and then I'd like you to click Submit. You have to click OK to Well Done, and then clicking OK to Well Done is going to close that workbook without saving the changes. And on your own, I'd ask you to practice that again with Navigate Lab D. So I'd like to thank you all for joining my first Excel tutorial. And if you have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to respond to any feedback that you can provide. I look forward to seeing you again in a take two. I look forward to seeing you again for the next video in my series, where we'll talk about data entry. If you have any questions, please post comments or feedback for me. Thank you.